Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be covering the top 10 best weapons in Armored Core 6. Now, yes, the game's only been out for 3 days. Probably a bit too early to do this, but you know what? We're going to do it anyway. Get the discussion rolling. Might as well. Now, I have beaten the game 3 times. I've played plenty of PvP, so I'm just going to take my personal experiences and incorporate it onto this list right here. Now, just to let you guys know, this list is actually going to be based on a PvE-based frame points. I will try to take both into consideration, but just to let you guys know, it's going to be mainly for PvE. Now, another thing I do want to mention is that looking at these weapons individually isn't going to be the best gauge to try and see how well they actually do perform, because their potential is always going to be brought out when you actually pair it alongside a specific type of weapon. So looking at something like a shotgun by itself, it's kind of average, but you pair it alongside another shotgun, you have one of the best builds in the entire game. Now look at something like a plasma gun in your hand. That shit's kind of mid, but a plasma gun on your shoulder is actually pretty decent. So yeah, you definitely keep these things in mind when actually looking at this list itself. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's just get into it. Now, starting off, there is a couple of honorable mentions I do want to talk about. The first one is the linear rifle Harris. Now, linear rifles are actually pretty decent weapons. They're very good range-based weapons, pretty quick. You can charge them pretty quickly as well. They have nice direct hit damage. So if you do have a build that is going to be more about long range, I would suggest going with this weapon. Now, next, I want to talk about the Aperitif. Now, this is a siege missile launcher, which is a missile launcher that you can put on your hand, which is amazing. And the best part about it is that you can actually move around while shooting it at the exact same time and shoot out your other weapons also while shooting this one. Now, this pairs nicely with reverse joint builds that you're trying to not get hit and keep on constantly moving over and over again. This is a nice way to just do some very decent impact and total overall damage itself while trying to move around. Starting off at number 10, we have the Walter 011. Now, this weapon is a coral rifle, which is very similar to a plasma rifle. In fact, Nebula is pretty much the direct comparison. And both these weapons have very nice range, being that they're energy-based. They don't really have any damage fall-off. They actually do have some decent damage, and unfortunately, they are pretty slow projectiles. So I do like to pair them alongside tank-type builds to where you can actually rush a lot quicker. So it's a lot easier to hit. But against immobile enemies that are far away, it does do a very good job at that as well. Now, unfortunately, you get the Walter at New Game +2. Whereas obviously the Nebula, you can get it pretty early on. And the main differences being is that Nebula is actually going to have more damage and actually have a faster rate of fire. But the reason as to why I prefer Walter is because it actually has much more ammo. You have 180 rounds compared to the Nebula's 58, which is just definitely not enough to last you an entire mission. Now, if you're doing arenas or PvP, then Nebula is just going to be the better option. But another reason as to why I do like Walter is because he has 2 different charge attacks. Has this regular, normal charge attack that does some very nice damage, and it has a second charge that turns it into like this big-ass giant beam that does ridiculous damage and ridiculous impact. However, you have to like manually aim it, and you get very low sensitivity when trying to aim it, so it doesn't really work out very well. It's only going to be good against large immobile types of bosses, and when you actually do use it against them, it just performs extremely well. So yeah, I'll use the Walter for just missions, and I'll use the Nebula for PvP or arenas. At number 9, we have the JVLN Alpha Detonating Bazooka. Now, this is basically a grenade cannon that you can just put onto your regular hand, which is just honestly incredible. Now, this thing is a detonating bazooka, and the difference being compared to a regular bazooka is that this one gets like a cool cluster bomb aftershock effect that is hits even more and just does even more damage and do even more impact. And the stats of this weapon, the impact is already high enough as it is. And a good thing about this is it has ridiculously high direct hit adjustment. Like the direct hit damage you can get off for this thing is just insane. And with only a 5-second reload time, this thing actually does perform better than most grenade cannons that you have on your shoulder. So you can just actually free up those slots to actually have other types of things like laser cannons if you wanted to, and just have the detonating bazooka just be your main big bomb. Now, the only downside I can say about this weapon is that it is very heavy. So if you actually wanted to use it with smaller types of builds, unfortunately, you probably cannot. You probably have to settle with a smaller type of bazooka or a smaller type of grenade launcher. But yeah, if you can equip it, definitely recommend that you do. At number 8, we have the KRSV, or the Kurosawa Multi-Energy Rifle. Now, this thing is very similar to a plasma rifle in that it has very nice range, gets a cool little AoE upon impact. But the main difference being is that this one does actually have a lot faster of a fire rate to where you're going to spam it over and over again. And this thing also gets 2-part charge animation as well. Very similar to the Walter in that the second charge just turns it into this massive beam that does very good damage. Now, obviously it doesn't last as long as the Walter does, nor probably do as much damage, but it is extremely quick. And I definitely recommend using it and fully charging it every single chance that you get. And I feel like every single time you are going to be using this gun, you probably would be charging it because it doesn't really get much ammo. You only get 80 rounds, and with how fast you actually can fire this thing, it's definitely not going to last an entire mission. So the way to use it is just definitely to keep on fully charging it to just get in that big boy damage and that big boy impact, because it is definitely worth using. Now, unfortunately, to acquire this weapon, you have to reach your log hunt of 12, which is going to require a lot of exploration and probably go into New Game Plus as well. And another thing, this thing has a weight of 10,000 units as well, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So if you're actually planning of, dual wielding these things, yeah, good luck. At number 7, we have the Moonlight blade or the REDSHIFT blade. Both are pretty much the exact same thing, and how they work is that they're swords that get a very solid projectile attack that can go pretty far. You actually get multiple hits as well, and you get a pretty solid charge attack, and these things just do very nice damage and very good impact. And being that these things are actually considered melee based weapons despite being projectiles, you can actually spec into your melee specialization stat or your melee tuning and actually end up doing a lot of damage that way. Now, the differences between the Moonlight and the REDSHIFT is that the REDSHIFT does more damage and is more direct hit adjustment, so it's basically just a direct upgrade. However, the Moonlight does get a bit more charge attack power, but it's not going to be as useful as just doing more damage in general. Now, unfortunately, the REDSHIFT is acquired in New Game Plus 2 of the last arena boss, whereas the Moonlight, you can actually get that at the end of Chapter 4, down a bridge next to some bone wheel skeletons. But yeah, both of these weapons are extremely good, and any chance you get to use it, I definitely recommend that you do because they're very fun to have. Now it's number 6, I want to talk about two laser cannons. We have the regular laser cannon, the VP60 LCS, and I want to talk about the diffuse laser cannon, the VP60 LCD. Now, the reason as to why I like these is because they're back weapons that you can actually just spam over and over again. So you actually should pair these alongside regular weapons that you have in your main hand that probably require a lot of reloading, mainly shotguns, because after you use your shotgun, you have to reload and you're pretty much just not doing any type of damage, where these laser cannons actually do come into effect because you can just spam them in the meantime while you're reloading your guns. So that's the pretty best use of these things. Now, the differences between them is that the laser cannon is just going to have more range, but does not do as much damage. And obviously the diffuse laser cannon is going to be more of your shotgun based type of laser cannon. It's going to have that less range, but do more damage and probably fire a little bit quicker as well. Now, the uses of these, I'll probably have the laser cannon more for that shotgun type of build because you want to have more range. Basically, when you're going throughout missions, you just want to be able to cover certain types of ranges. But if you're doing PvP, then probably the diffuse laser cannon is probably going to be the better option because you can just bum rush your enemy and just keep spamming all 4 of these things at once, and it'll perform extremely well. As number 5, we have the Bad Cook Flamethrower. Now, this thing is incredibly fun to use because it's basically like an AoE that goes incredibly far. It's like very easy to actually make contact and actually hit enemies with it. Now, the projectile speed isn't going to be like the fastest thing in the world, but the fact that you can just keep spamming it and holding onto it the entire time just kind of mitigates that anyway. Now, this thing has just a little bit less range than a machine gun as well, which is just amazing. And it has insane amount of ammo. You can just last the entire mission. I've like never run out of ammo when using this thing, and I've used it plenty of times. And the best thing about it is that it does have that fire status effect type of thing, in that it does decrease the stability of enemies to where they just get staggered a lot easier. And obviously staggering is like the best way to just do any type of damage in this game. So to having this weapon and just holding onto it, I like to pair it alongside a Gatling gun, or just having 2 flamethrowers is just really fun as well. Now, obviously it is going to require it to be cooled down after it does overheat, which does happen, obviously. But it's just a really good weapon that's extremely easy to use. At number 4, I just want to talk about shotguns in general. I just want to highlight my 2 favorite ones, the Zimmerman shotgun and the Huerta laser shotgun. Now, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, shotguns are extremely powerful when you have multiple of them. So having one in your left and right hand and then spamming them at the exact same time performs extremely good because they just do ridiculous damage and ridiculous impact damage when they both end up landing. Now, the Zimmerman just does this the best because it gets really good impact. Now, I like to use it alongside laser cannons in my shoulders because after I shoot the Zimmerman, they have to reload, which is definitely going to be the downside to shotguns themselves. Every single time you have to shoot it, you have to reload, which is where the laser cannons come into effect, because after you're reloading, you're basically shooting the cannons to constantly keep up that stagger damage, and then your Zimmerman is reloaded, you can just continue the process. Now, if you didn't like this certain type of playstyle and you actually wanted to be able to spam your guns over and over again because you probably want different types of back weapons, that's when the Huerta laser shotgun does come into effect, because this thing is a laser shotgun, so you can actually spam it over and over again because it doesn't have that magazine. It actually goes on cooling, so you just keep spamming it until obviously you get that overheating effect where it has to cool down again. But you actually can spam it multiple times and actually has some pretty decent rate of fire as well, and it gets some very good impact. So I definitely recommend using this one if you didn't really care to actually have to constantly reload, because both of these things work just as well. Number 3, we have the Songbirds. Probably going to be like the most used weapon in the entire game because they're just insanely good. Look at the stats. It's ridiculous. They do ridiculously high impact, good damage. They just go so fast as well, like travel in a flat line, very good blast radius that can hit multiple enemies at once. It's just really neat. And they're actually pretty light for a grenade cannon and with only a 6-second reload time, you can't really go wrong. And grenade cannons are just the reasons why nobody's ever going to really want to use missile launchers, because missile launchers are still easy to dodge and they're slower, and you can't really benefit of actually getting direct hit damage with missile launchers, because obviously no enemy is going to get staggered for that long. Hence, grenade cannons are just going to be the best because they're pretty easier to hit. All you can do is just bum rush your enemy and just time it correctly, and you end up hitting more times than not. They're just insanely good, and you have multiple hits with this thing as well. Like, I don't understand. There's no other need to use like any other type of back weapon other than the Songbirds. That is that good. Now, I guess the only downside is probably the direct hit damage isn't as good, but like it's still decent. So I don't know. You can just spam it over and over again and you're just going to succeed with the Songbirds. It's definitely going to be one of the best back weapons in the entire game. Number 2, we have the HUBEN Gatling gun. Now, rapid fire weapons are just amazing in like almost every single Armored Core game. Every time that I play Armored Core, I'm always like just defaulting to rapid fire weapons, and the Gatling gun is just further proof of that. And it's probably the best rapid fire weapon in this entire game because it's just amazing. It's basically like an upgraded version of a machine gun because you don't have to worry about reloading. There's no magazine. Now you don't have to worry about that overheating effect, but you just hit a lot of bullets before that even comes into play. But this thing is just so incredibly easy to use with how fast that it does attack. You're just rarely going to miss, and especially with that high recoil stat that you do have, enemies are just like really going to dodge this thing and get insanely high direct hit adjustment. And with that rapid fire pace, you're going to constantly do that stagger type of damage. So enemies are just going to be constantly getting pressured over and over again. It's just amazing. Every time I try to make a build and I'm trying to use like a primary weapon and like looking through like the assault rifles and the linear rifles, the burst machine guns, and I'm just looking at all this stuff and I'm like, nope, it's just not as good as the HUBEN. HUBEN does everything that they do, just way better. It's just great. In the previous Armored Core games, machine guns or rapid fire weapons in general were just very expensive in terms of your expenses. Like, you were pretty much going into debt straight away in the previous games if you're using machine guns. But in this game, expenses aren't much of a big deal, so just go hard with the Gatling gun. It's fine. Number 1, as to what I consider the best weapon in the entire game, we have the VE60 SNA Stun Needle Launcher. This thing is a back weapon that does pretty much everything. It has really good range, it has insane damage, gets pretty decent impact, it has a blast radius because it gets a little AoE effect upon impact as well, and it has a 5-second reload time, and you get ridiculously high direct hit adjustment. I'm pretty sure it's the highest direct hit adjustment in the entire game. So your damage with this thing is just going to be out of this world. As soon as you get the stagger, you use the needle launcher, you're just melting everything. And it has that 2-part attack. You have the initial hit and the explosion AoE, so it's doing even more damage, and it gets a shock status effect. And the shock status effect just makes it do even more damage. And it's not like the projectile speed is slow as well. It's a pretty quick projectile speed. You're pretty much going to hit with it more times than not. You just benefit of using this thing in almost every single type of build. It's not even that heavy as well. Like, I don't really know what the downsides even are. They're just amazing. Everything about this weapon is just amazing. Anyway, that pretty much concludes it for this one. Please do let me know down in the comments if I have missed any types of weapons that you consider to be really good, because I can guarantee I probably have missed some stuff. The game's only been out for a few days. I can guarantee if I look back at this video a few months from now, I'm probably going to disagree with a whole bunch of stuff that I said. But you know what? It's good for discussion either way. Anyway, please do like and subscribe because I will have some more Armored Core videos coming along the way. And do follow me on Twitch because I am live there every single day. Anyway, see you in the next one, guys. Bye.